Power through surrender is a natural next step after acknowledgement. After we acknowledge our truth and our stories, we have a lot of options for how we can respond to these feelings and memories. Power through surrender is learning the difference between what we can and what we can't control in our lives. I think of the serenity prayer that is often used in 12-step programs. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. When we have a clear picture of what we can and can't control, we have the freedom to do two amazing things. First, we let go of putting our time and energy into trying to control the impossible or unnecessary. And second, we use that time and energy to take action where we really can make a difference. We can redirect our efforts to bring positive change into our lives. An example that comes to my mind when I think about this strategy is a powerful healing story from my grandfather's life. My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor during World War II. He was part of the anti-Nazi resistance movement, but was eventually caught and taken to Auschwitz as a political prisoner. He witnessed and withstood torture and abuse regularly. He lost his home, many friends, and family during this war, and weighed under 90 pounds by the time the war was over. I didn't get to meet this hero until a few decades later when I was born. I grew up knowing that he was a prisoner during the war from his stories and from the prisoner number the Nazis had tattooed on his forearm. I never viewed him as being broken, weak, or as a victim. Early on in his life, he decided that he would not let this horrible experience define him. He decided that he would not become bitter, angry, or vengeful, even though he could have. He decided that he would make meaning from his story. He was the kindest, most loving, and strongest man I ever met. He had to accept and grieve the losses of his friends and family to be able to move forward with the rest of his life. He would never be able to erase the fact that the war happened, but he found his own way to make sure that he took control of what his experiences would mean in his life. He would share his story with anyone who was willing to listen in order to build awareness and to teach about the consequences of war and ignorance. He also chose to live his life in peace and kindness. And through his example, he was able to teach many people that it is possible to put your broken pieces together and come out more beautiful in the end. Power through surrender is so important for healing because this is when survivors get to reclaim their power and realize that they get to write their own stories starting right now.
In conclusion, I would like to share a story that exemplifies power through surrender. The artist Chuck Close is a good example of someone who has found power through surrender. Part of power through surrender is knowing what to fight, and just as importantly, knowing what not to fight. When he was only 48 years old, Close suffered a burst artery that left him paralyzed from the neck down. Initially, Close was devastated because he thought he would never paint again. He says, "I remember saying, 'You see, I told you I can't do it,' with tears running down my cheeks." Close could have given up and never painted again, but he figured out a way to keep making art. He started wearing a brace that would keep his hand gripped around his paintbrush, and he worked to regain enough movement in his arm to paint. Close could have spent his time focusing on the thought, "I can't do it." Instead, he chose to let that thought be. By letting it be, he was able to focus on productive thoughts. Close is 76 today, and despite his significant setbacks, he's still making art. Just like Close, you could spend all of your time fighting your limbic system. Instead, identify your trauma voice for what it is, and find power in moving forward and strengthening your prefrontal cortex. I hope as you focus on power through surrender this week, you find peace in practicing this strategy.